Alright, what we got here is the 4L60E shift kit, standard by Transgo. It's not the HD. Got a bunch of springs and new pins. Get this bad boy replaced here. So I've heard online that you shouldn't mess with the accumulators. I went ahead and took my 1-2 accumulator apart because I got a plastic piston, so wasn't expecting that. I'm gonna go ahead and order a metallic piston and get that taken care of. I'm gonna leave all the stock springs in it just because people said not to mess with it. So to get this piston out, it's sealed in there by that ring. It was in there pretty tight. So what I had to do is there's some prongs right here that are raised, and I just kind of spun them and pulled down with my nails at the same time. That was enough to break the suction between the O-ring and the 1-2 accumulator top. Like I said, I'm just going to leave the existing springs in there, replace the cap, piston cap, and put that back together and not mess with it anymore from there. Next part here is the EPC screen fix. So you take your large screen here, comes with this wire spacer, essentially just slides up in there, and that'll keep the screen from collapsing at high RPMs, which causes clutch to burn and along with the band. What happens when the screens touch, go ahead and causes low line pressure, high throttle. So there's also an optional additional safety, which is to drill 2 1/16 inch holes through the top of the plastic plate here, and or 4.040 to 0.047 holes. I think the spacer in there is just going to be enough. I'm not going to go ahead and drill through the top of the plate. So just going to add the spacer, and that's that. So after you do the spring and the large spring fix, next stop is going to be the pressure regulator. So it comes with new components for that. You get a new spring, 2 orange springs, and boost bushing, and a new snap ring that goes in there. So that component, since I'm doing with the transmission in the vehicle, I might have to go under and do that here now. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to bring the camera under with me. So, looks pretty easy. Take it out, reassemble it in the order they're showing, and then put it back together. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Alright, so here are the components for the pressure regulator. You got your boost bushing components. Inside that's this little piston. Nothing to do in there, just took it out to show you. So here's the original springs that were with it. The small red one. Got this softer black one. It's pretty stiff. Between the new ones, same size. Orange one's a little stiffer. And, here's the new one, a little larger too. It's a little thicker diameter coil spring and feels to be a little stiffer. So we're going to go ahead and reassemble this. So you'll have your boost bushing, and you have your larger orange spring. Your smaller orange spring goes inside. And then That's about it. The pressure regulator itself stayed up inside, so I don't see any point on taking that out. Just make sure it's up in there, and then reassemble. So being the type of person I am, I couldn't go without seeing what this pressure regulator was. So here it is. It pretty much sits up into the transmission like this. Your valve body comes up like that. So you got this. Your orange spring sits here. This is called your bumper spring there. And all that will go back up into the transmission itself like this. So there you go. Had to pull it out, had to look at it. It's the way I am. So bonus. And then here's the new snap ring that holds it all in place once you get it up in there. I did read to use this big spring, put this up into the transmission first. Take the big, I guess you can leave the big spring there. Put the little spring in, then put your boost bushing back on. Get your snap ring pliers ready, push it all up. Fit it in place. Once you get it in place, make sure you wiggle a little bit with a screwdriver. Make sure that snap ring gets set up inside. Alright, the next steps are going to be to drill out the holes in the separator plate. Went ahead and marked out the 6 holes I need to drill .093. Kit comes with the drill bit. Follow your instructions for this part. This is for the 4L60E standard kit. HD kit may be different, don't know, don't have it. So instructions are marked very well on your sheet. Follow them. There's also 2 other holes that you have to drill out depending on how firm you want your shift, your 1-2 shift. Then depending on your second piston cap number, which hole you need to drill for that component. So follow your instructions, they're well labeled, and good luck drilling. So on the back of the second piston, there's some numbers in there. Rotate this here. So right there, 553. That's going to depend on, you're going to use that number to drill one of the holes in your spacer plate, and with that it's going to be your 2-3 shift quality. So I'm supposed to drill it out to .070 to 0.76 on my separator plate, and that's outlined in the instructions when you're going to go ahead and drill out the holes. Alright, so here we're dealing with the second piston upgrade. I went ahead and bought the Corvette servo kit as well. It pretty much came with the housing and a new second piston. Here's the housing, and this component here is the second piston. So okay, we're assembling all this back together now for putting it back into the truck. So you got you're supposed to reuse this black pin that came out with it. You got this big valve here. You got this, I don't know, just a steel cover. They recommend go ahead and put these 4 recesses in the edges of the steel cover for oil flow. I was hesitant to do it, but I went ahead and did. Those are the 4 cuts they recommended putting in there. Going ahead and sealing this back together now. I got the pins it came with. Came with a new black one, new blue one. Stick those in there. Got the original spring that was in the assembly. Before all that, there's this little coil spacer you're supposed to put in, then the black screen, and the blue spring, and the original spring goes over top of all them. Then you go ahead and slide the second piston onto the assembly here. Before I do that, in order to take my old second piston off, it had formed a rim around the edge of this valve, so I had to use real fine sandpaper, just sanded it off enough to get this second piston off of it. The new one goes on without a problem. Then they go ahead and assemble the new housing. These notches face to your left, my right. And you got a little spring that you stick back on there. You got your shim or washer that goes on there. And then your snap ring, your E-ring holds all that together. Then you assemble your fourth piston and the cover. And then your retaining wire that holds the cover on. There is a gold shim in here. You pretty much gotta place it in and test some movement on your band before you decide if you're gonna keep it in there or take it out. So when you do that, do not put your O-ring on, because you have to put the assembly in, check for play. If it's okay, then you take the cover off, put the O-ring on, cover back on, snap ring, and you're good to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish that up now. Next, we're gonna install the ISO conversion valve. Here's the original. So this piece was in the valve body first, followed by the spring, and then this last part of this valve. So we'll go in there like that. This is what's going to cause your oscillation while in overdrive and or third gear manually. Your torque converter still locks up in third gear. So if you're getting a 200 RPM swing between the speed of 40 and 65, it's going to be due to this guy here. The valve wears out, lets transmission fluid pass, which causes it to oscillate your torque converter. So all this gets discarded, and then Transgo kit provides the new ISO conversion valve, which will eliminate the oscillation along with your, I believe it's the 1870 code that people will be getting. So I'm going to go ahead and install that next. There's a screw that comes with the kit. You screw into here, and that's going to allow you to push the valve in and out, they say about 20 times. Then you're going to remove the screw and install the kit as planned. So go ahead and do that now. So you're looking to get the valve to go in and out of the bore with little effort. Mine slid in there pretty good. So you're going to want this to drop in on its own. I lost count, probably at 20, if not past 20 already. I'm just giving some strokes with some side pressure. Seems to go in there pretty well. No resistance. Alright, so we got our blue spring. We're going to install to the bore, followed by the new ISO conversion valve. Threaded side goes out. Slide that into the bore. Go ahead and put your cap back on. Matters which way you go. And your retaining clip to hold your cap in place in the valve. Alright, now we're going to add an additional spring to the actuator valve that sits behind the pressure control solenoid. So you got the valve, you're going to slide that into the bore. so. We're going to reuse the original spring. We're going to slide him back in there. We're going to install the white spring inside the original spring. Reinstall our cap. And reinstall the clip. Clip goes into the 4th hole slot. So right there. In order to do that, we're going to have to push the cap in. It is under spring tension. And then you can release it. Alright, for this step we're doing a little bit of 2 things. I got the Transgo kit that upgrades a spring and adds a steel ball into the torque valve. So that's what I'm working on now. I left the actual torque valve inside. Next we're going to go ahead and reuse the original spring. But before we do that, we're going to stick a 3/16 ball, steel ball inside that. Slide it back into the body. We're going to put this divider back in. It's held in there with a roll pin. Push this in, drop the roll pin in. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Just make sure your holes are lined up. Just got a fish. Slide it through. Once you get it in place, drop your roll pin down. That'll hold in your torque valve, divider in there. Where to stick the other component at. We're going to reinstall the low valve. Then on top of the low valve, you install this yellow spring. And this cover will go back on. I'm going to go ahead and install the pinless. Drove in 2 ball bearings into the forward accumulator to eliminate the pin. We installed the D-ring, which is the rubber one, the PTFE ring, which is the plastic seal, onto the new piston. Piston slides into the bore. Like so. Reuse the original OEM spring. And reinstall the cover with 3 bolts. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and do the 3-2 solenoid. Taking out the original spring. Installing the new spring. New spring slightly longer than the original. So I've already taken out the solenoid. Already taken the solenoid out from up here. So we're going to go ahead and slide the spring in. Install the solenoid with the fat end sticking out. Sorry, the 3-2 control valve with the fat end sticking out. Just wiggle a little bit. It'll eventually fall in there. And we'll reinstall the solenoid itself. And insert the retaining clip. Now I'm going to go ahead and install the accumulator bushing valve. On the end of the bushing valve, you'll have a letter stamped into it. My letters are DX. Probably can't see it, but anyway. Stamped on the end of the bushing is a code. Match that code up to your piston along with your code. It tells you what color spring to install on here. Mine turns out to be yellow. So you slide the spring in. Slide the spring into the correct hole. Slide in the bushing. It's very important that you have it facing upwards. Instructions say to, when installing this, have it up and down to aid in the spring staying on the accumulator valve while you're installing it. Once you got that done, you can reinstall your pin, roll pin. Alright, what we got here is the 1-2 accumulator cover. Went ahead and drove out the OEM pin that was down sitting in that holder. We're going to go ahead and put in the Sonic's pinless accumulator. So put the D-ring on, I put the PTFE seal on. Comes with a 2-ball bearings, larger one and a smaller one, to go into the pin bore based off, the size of the pin. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to go ahead and use the smaller ball, and we're going to use the original OEM pin to seat that ball in place. And the ball is seated in place, and they recommend you go ahead and stake the inside of the accumulator cap to make sure that that ball doesn't come out. So then we install our piston. Here are the springs, stock springs. As I mentioned before, I wasn't going to replace them. So I'm putting the stock springs back in. And we'll put the assembly together. Alright, here's the 1-2 accumulator with the new piston in. I went ahead and lubricated the D-ring and the PTFE ring, and with Vaseline. Coated the inside cylinder wall. Went ahead, got the springs lined up, and piston action is back. Here we got the original 4th accumulator piston. Went ahead and pulled that out. It had a guide pin with it as well. Pulled the pin out, pulled the piston out, discard the pin, discard the piston. Got the Sonex pinless 4th accumulator piston. Went ahead and installed the D-ring, the PTFE ring, per the Transgo kit. Took out the old spring, replacing it with the yellow spring. And then we'll slide this back up into the case of the transmission. And before you do that, install the large ball bearing that came with the kit first, and then the piston second.